Joining us now in studio, the president of hockey content at the Daily Faceoff. It's NHL insider Frank Seravalli. Welcome to town.
Yeah, great to be here, guys. Great to be in your studio. This place is awesome, and always good to be back in Van, if not a little wet.
Yes. What brings you here?
Training camp. I really think the Canucks are one of the most interesting stories in the league this year. There's all sorts of expectations and pressure. I think there's a whole host of talent. I think this team improved a bit, and I'm curious to spend some time around them and see what I learn.
You go way back with Rick Tocchet. Two Philly guys,
yeah,
right?
I've known Rick a while. We did TV together kind of when I was first starting, maybe like 15 years ago. And just, he's an interesting guy. So looking forward to seeing him.
Do you think players will, I mean, he's done this before, but it's been a bit. Do you think players latch on to a guy like Rick Tocchet?
Yeah, I do because he's genuine.
Yeah.
There's no BS about what he does or says. There's no fancy speech. There's no, rah-rah. It's put your hard hat on and come to work and try and improve. And I think that rings true because first off, he had a fascinating career. He's one of those guys that when you look at his penalty minutes and then you look at his points and his games played, first off, he never took anything for granted. Yeah. And second, any little thing that he had in his toolbox, he was forced to use because he was never the most talented guy. So his career, and then now you look at his coaching arc too, and the different experiences he's had, the different people that he's worked with along the way. There's a lot of knowledge that he's amassed that I think he's able to connect with players in a way that's authentic.
JT Miller, most specifically, do you think? Do you think there's a little grasshopper there in JT Miller, despite being 30 years old, that he might try to get the best out of JT Miller at this stage?
Look, he got the best out of Phil Kessel at that stage too. Yeah. Almost the same exact age. Yeah. And I'd say JT has you said grasshopper, and the first thing I thought of was spring in his step.
Yeah.
He definitely has way more of that than Phil Kessel did at that age, so why not?
Yeah. It was 1,144 games for Tocchet, 952 points, 2,972 penalty minutes.
He almost had 3,000 penalty minutes and 1,000 points.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
That's got to be a short list.
And often I think of him too in terms of, he was on Team Canada because he could fit with other skilled players. He made it a habit of fitting with skilled players. He could fit with rough players. So we'll see what he does here from a coaching perspective. What's your forecast for the club? Like, they are hoping to be a playoff team. How realistic do you think that is?
My bold prediction, and one of the reasons I'm here, is that the Canucks make the playoffs. If you're in the Vancouver Canucks front office, you're saying, hey, that's not that bold.
Yeah, exactly.
What's wrong with you?
We knew that.
Yeah.
Although they just said it, if everything has to go right. So they're on the fence, I think, a little bit.
Well, first off, they need to get off to a good start. You can't tank your season by mid-November. You can't be the Ottawa Senators again.
Yeah.
And that is a big focal point. But I also liked what Rick Tocchet said last week when he was talking about, the idea, we know we need to get off to a good start. Everyone knows we need to get off to a good start. The only way to achieve that, it's the cliche, but one day at a time. It can't overwhelm you, which is the hard part about how you approach that mentally.
We've been talking about the division though too. The division is kind of putting their playoff aspirations on a tee. I mean, they've got two weak sisters in their division that they could absolutely clobber on the regular in the Ducks and the Sharks. Now, it's not as unbalanced a schedule as it used to be. You don't get the 8 games anymore, but still, there's those two teams, and then teams like Calgary, where you're just like, I don't know what the Flames are and how good they're going to bounce back themselves. So there's opportunity there if they're slightly better than average. Doesn't it pose like a pretty good storyline for them?
It's interesting that that's how you framed it, because I'm not entirely sure that I see it the same way. I actually think the Pacific is the hardest division in the league.
Okay, explain.
Because I think 5 teams in the Pacific are making the playoffs.
Wow, really?
I think there's only 3 coming from the Central, because I don't think the Central is very good this year. You've got Winnipeg falling off, most likely, sure. Nashville, St. Louis, not really sure what to make of them. I think you've got the big 3 in the Central, Colorado, You've got Minnesota, Dallas. Those teams are going to be right in the mix. But the Pacific, I think, you've got some legitimate Stanley Cup contenders and heavyweights. You've got the Oilers. You've got the Golden Knights. I think the Kings are a really good team that just happen to be stuck behind those other two teams that if they played in a different conference, they probably would have a better path. And then you mentioned the Flames, and they're not really in all that different a spot than the Canucks. And I'm actually kind of making my way east on this training camp tour. I'm starting in Van, going to Edmonton, and then Calgary. Calgary's in a very similar spot in that they've got authentic expectations to be a playoff team, to take a step forward, a new coach, new GM, totally new feel. What does that translate to? I don't know. And then you've got the Kraken. Yes. I don't know what to make of the Kraken.
No, that's true. Mm-hmm.
And I think the Kraken could be a playoff team. I think I could easily see them falling off.
Yep.
Yep. I was thinking about this last week for NHL insiders like yourself as we move towards trade deadline, and I know it's super, super early, but between the three Western Canadian teams not named Edmonton, whether it's Calgary, Winnipeg, or here in Vancouver if things go poorly, I imagine the buzzards will be circling one of those three franchises by trade deadline with the personnel that could be available, right? When you take a look at who Calgary has on expiring deals, who Winnipeg has on expiring deals, and, of course, the big Elias question here.
Is it really a question?
Okay, you tell me. It's not?
It's not for me. Like, I personally, I don't think he's going anywhere. And I also think he's authentic in a desire to play in Vancouver. I think the reason he's not signed is that this is my personal view, is he believes he's 102, 105, 110 point player in this league every year, the way that he's, took a huge step last year. And I think he wants to be paid like that. And the idea that he's going to sign an 8-year deal and it's going to be for, a bargain number, it's probably unrealistic. So the reason he's not signed isn't because he doesn't want to be here. It's because the Canucks didn't put that money on the table.
He wants the 13 mil cap hit instead of the 10.5 mil cap hit. Is that it?
Or something that brings him closer in line with a Pasternak or someone else that's in that sort of similar caliber of player that I just don't think the Canucks have put it on the table.
Why not then? They know the cap's going up. Their best player can't afford to lose him, wouldn't want the distraction. Why wouldn't Vancouver put the number
I think they want to see it again.
Really?
If I was running the team, I would want to see it again.
For reference, Pasternak 11.3, 11.25 on the cap. So, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to be consistent in this league. It's hard to take yet another step further forward from the level that he's at. To go from 100 to 115, it's a big deal. If he's, if let's say he goes back to the, mid 80s. Or low 80s. You're having a different type of conversation than if you're the Canucks. I don't know that there's,
I don't think he loses money with an 84-point season, but I think he's got the potential to gain a lot of money if he has 105.
Well, that's my point, because that's what the Canucks were already putting on the table, I think. Something in that neighborhood. Right. Yeah. So is it really a step down for him? It's probably just the same as what was already available to him.
Yeah.
Tyler Myers has his bonus. They have said we're not interested in trading Tyler Myers, although there has certainly been a lot of buzz around his name since this management group took over. What's your sense on the Tyler Myers file and where that goes, if anywhere?
Yeah, I think a lot of people had September 15th circled on their calendar as if somehow magically that was going to be a day that he was on his way out. It has been a fascinating dynamic just because, and I think his agent, JP Barry, had said something similar to this, that from the moment that contract was signed, it was like that they kind of wanted to move off of that. And I know there was the regime change in the middle of it, but I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. I think they're really conscientious of trying to make sure this team is as competitive as possible. You see even a margin trade like the DeSmith one, they're trying to improve in every area possible. So they want to be competitive, and having Tyler Myers part of your top six, I think certainly beats the alternative right now from a cap perspective.
What went on with San Jose this summer and Myers?
Yeah, so They spoke a number of times and had something on the table. I believe it was straight up Tyler Myers for Kevin LeBanc. It was you take a contract I'm unhappy with for a contract that we're unhappy with. And, the upside for the Canucks was that they'd save a little bit on the cap. And the upside for the Sharks was they'd potentially save a little cash.
And have a right shot defenseman to pedal at the deadline, right?
That was part of it too. Yeah. But the Canucks are like, well, wait a second. We could just have that for ourselves if we don't have the season that we want.
Yes. Yeah. I saw you tweeting about there are still some RFAs, and Blake and I did this story as outsiders last week, looking on a little bit of information. What the hell is going on with Trevor Zegras in Anaheim? Because that's a pretty good player to be nickel and diming this early in his career.
Yeah, it's been an uncomfortable spot, I think, for Zegras and the Ducks. I think when you consider the salary cap structure that Pat Verbeek has put in place, like Trevor Zegras is a young guy who's clearly dynamic and has all the skill in the world, but has room to grow. Troy Terry is their team's best player. And so they got Troy Terry on a long-term deal at $7. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, okay, Troy Terry's our best player. Mm-hmm. You need to get in line. Wow. Get under that number. That's my understanding. Yeah. And
they're still a budget team, right, Frank? They're not a spend to the cap team.
Well, they shouldn't be anyway. They're rebuilding.
Yeah.
So, but if you're looking at it from a long-term view, you should try. My philosophy is you should try and get all of the players that you can that you believe are core pieces signed to the longest term deal possible at the lowest possible number that you can get them at. Sure. What that's going to result in for Trevor Zegras this time around is, wait a second, I've had two 60-point years and I'm 21 years old. I'm not signing a long-term deal under $7 million. He's going to do a bridge deal, whether it's 2 or 3 years. Whatever that AAV comes in at, they've clearly struggled to find common ground. And I think it kind of speaks to, I don't know if it's the environment that Pat Verbeek is fostering, but he is kind of managing like he played. He's a grinder.
And no one is getting over on Pat Verbeek in his first year on the
And Jamie Drysdale should stop dreaming of a Jake Sanderson deal, too. That's clearly not going to happen for him as he practices with the university team in Toronto.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate for Drysdale working back from that injury because last year he played 8 games, and to get a year of service, you had to hit 10. That gets you closer to arbitration, and I think that probably hurt. I think he needed 2 years, so it would have been one more anyway, but still, he's someone that 2 years ago we were talking about as one of the next bright young defensemen, 30 plus points as a rookie, that injury year really cost him, and he's going to have to sort of work his way back to earn it now.
Really interesting comment from Evgeny Kuznetsov in Washington on the weekend, where he says, quote, "It feels like in this organization, those who want to be there are kicked out, and those who don't want to be there are left behind." So apparently he's requested a trade, and Washington hasn't yet dealt him, and so now he's going to talk about it.
Well, do
the interpretation for us here, Frank.
Well, the interpretation is actually an interesting word choice, because this was to, if I'm not mistaken, a Russian news outlet. So
yes.
There is a healthy amount of interpretation that I'm sure you'll see him probably partially walk back some of it at some point. However, that's been a long-standing point of friction between the Caps and Kuznetsov. Like, they feel like he doesn't put in the work. He's not nearly consistent enough. He doesn't act like a pro. And I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. He's a really talented guy that's coming off of a 55-point year, his worst year in 10 years. And he was also the guy that, it feels like a lifetime ago, 5 years ago, I was trying to figure out on my Conn Smythe ballot, is it Kuznetsov driving the bus or was it Ovechkin?
Right.
And that contract has really hampered things. Trust me, it's not for lack of trying that the Washington Capitals still have Evgeny Kuznetsov. Like, they tried to move him multiple times, and I was told even in the last month or 6 weeks, we're still working to try and do that. I thought more interesting than those comments were the comments that he had about his coach in Peter Laviolette, saying that he was the exact wrong fit for the team and that he was basically trying to hold guys back. Maybe adds a sprinkle of spice to any future Caps Ranger game.
Yeah.
And more than that, he said that their new coach is...
This is Spencer Carberry, for those who don't know. Yeah. He's not a brand name just yet.
But he's been through their organization, coached in Hershey, and it has really been thought of as one of the next, up-and-comers in the league. He said he's the perfect match. So maybe if you're one of those guys that, plays point totals for specific players or whatever your prop du jour is, maybe Kuznetsov is a pretty solid bounce back.
He's only 31.
Which is crazy because he seems like as Frank said, his worst year in 10.
Yes, omnipresent. And he's a year removed from a point per game season with the Capitals. You'd think he'd be able to get a $7.8 million cap hit for that player off the books. 2 years left?
People just don't want to deal with exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Isn't that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a headache.
Yeah.
And part of that is you bring it on yourself. Part of it is when you have the allegations that you had against you for drug use, that. None of those things help.
No, very true. Marvelous stuff. Thank you for this. Welcome back to Vancouver. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to be here.
This Sick Harrison Price clip brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And remember,
it's all good at Applewood.